All right, Lance, thank you for your time today. If you could take just a brief second to introduce yourself, where your location is, and what you do, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Okay, sounds good. I am Lance Penhale. I'm the district advisor for First Command in Alaska. I live in Anchorage, Alaska, but I have offices in Fairbanks and Juneau, Alaska as well. So I oversee all of the Last Frontiers territory here.
Very cool. Well, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about recruiting, and so I want to start with like the difference that recruiting could make in your business. So, if you could easily recruit the ideal candidate, how would that change your business?
If I could easily recruit the ideal candidate,
Yep.
that would be incredible because new advisors, new ideas, new energy really pushes the rest of the team. Having been a Division I athlete once upon a time, I'll say that nothing is better for a team than a freshman that doesn't know they're on varsity. The challenge with this now is finding the ideal candidate and then assessing them over a proper duration, which I think is much longer than an interview phase. And so if I could do that, Jason, I think it makes this job incredibly easy and enjoyable.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Lance. So let's jump into sourcing. So just tell me, like, where do you typically search for your candidates?
I'll be honest now. LinkedIn is a fantastic tool to source candidates, and I will add an additional layer. I think what that really does is keep me sharp in my interview process so that when I am introduced to the candidates I truly want for the team, I am prepared to present myself and our mission the best. And so LinkedIn creates a steady stream of candidates, and some of them are great candidates, but I still find that the best candidates and therefore the best advisors actually come from engagement in the market, and then they pop up when you need them the most.
So when you talk about market engagement, you're talking about just being involved in the military community and stay in front of those people, and then over time, recruitment opportunities arise.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
I think when we're well known on the base, there's plenty of people that transition every year from the military, and I've found we get good candidates based off of our reputation.
Gotcha.
One thing I am working now, Jason, we have history at First Command to demonstrate that our best and most successful advisors are previous clients, and so my current recruiting strategy, I think, is time honored, and that is to attract high quality candidates through advisor success and market penetration, which is what I was just talking to. And then now with our systems, tracking advocates through ACE, using referrals, and identifying candidates through my advisors in our system gives me quality candidates consistently, but it does require buy-in from my team. And then lastly, dominate local market and digital presence. I think it is no longer just being present physically on the base. We have to be at top of mind, which requires a digital strategy.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. So thinking of those sources, and you already mentioned one thing that you liked about LinkedIn, but what are some of the other things that you like about those, and then a couple of things that stand out that you don't like?
I think LinkedIn, like I say, predominantly keeps you sharp because you could create volume. So I do like the efficiency. I stopped short of using AI generated messages. I think you could use that as a good place to start, or it'll iterate off previous templates you've established, but you could very quickly source many clients at once, and the percentage conversion to interview is relatively low, but if you are persistent in it, you will schedule interviews consistently. And so that is the best part of LinkedIn. The downside of LinkedIn is I think finding serious candidates can be difficult, and of course they are courting other job opportunities. And in our particular industry and practice, that may or may not be for everyone. So you don't have a filter prior to that. So you have to implement skill checks inside of that process when you're sending messages, sending them over to the website, et cetera. So LinkedIn is a good place to meet a high volume of candidates with a low conversion rate. Being present in the market and having your current team members advocate for district growth, trying to bring in their quality clients and prospects as potential advisors. I think you have a much higher conversion ratio based off that relationship and genuine exposure to our mission.
Okay. All right. How do you incorporate your ideal candidate profile into the process?
I review it consistently. And I know from experience and from mentorship, other folks' experience, that if you don't have ideal candidate criteria, you're gonna have a much higher volume of attrition later in the business. And it's best for the candidate and the team and the enterprise if we do our due diligence on the front end. And so I incorporate it throughout my interview process, making sure I'm asking questions that addresses the ideal candidate profile.
Do you use the filters on LinkedIn to filter through some of those candidates based off like an ideal quality that you have in mind?
That's an interesting question because I do not.
Okay.
I have, and I do use filters, but those aren't the characteristics that I'm looking for.
Gotcha.
There are times I will use those filters to find someone with experience now trying to expedite an activation or a business need that I have. And so it's much more objective criteria that I'm looking for. What level of success have they already achieved? But this business in sales, a lot of the candidates we're finding with experience that relates to our military mission don't overlap. So there has to be some framing there. And so I use it to look at I use filters in LinkedIn to find specific types of candidates, and then I shoot volume. But my ideal candidate profile, that is something I assess through the interview process and beyond.
Okay, that works. Have you ever utilized a sourcing tool?
A sourcing tool outside of LinkedIn, I've used Recruit Military regularly. I am using Salesforce as a tool in my souring process.
Okay.
And that, I believe, will be my most successful strategy, but it is not a solo practice. It requires buy-in and technical competency from my advisors to participate in that strategy.
Okay. And how much time a week do you spend on sourcing?
I like to say 5 hours a week, at least one deliberate hour a day. And I'll say that is that's my best guess.
Okay.
Because I think that sourcing is persistent. It needs to be a behavior. I think it is a behavior, just like prospecting is a mindset. I think recruiting also has to be persistent in the way that I see the district, in the way that I see marketing events, and any public communications is sourcing. So, but your question, I think, is specifically how many times am I shooting emails or making phone calls, et cetera. That's at least 5 hours a week, and I'll say that's not including the time of interviews.
Yeah, that's I'll have that question in a second.
Yeah, so I think that it requires persistency, and 5 hours, you can send a lot of emails.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so shifting to selling the opportunity, what's your current process for communicating the mission of the company?
That's part of the skill check process. I I honestly start with, what have you heard about First Command so far? I think that is indicative of someone's character, their work ethic, and their professional experience.
Okay.
I will entertain a client who is dipping their toe in the water and they're trying to figure out what something is about. So I will first ask them, I will try to give them exposure into the daily operations of an advisor. And I'll ask tough questions like, when you hear the word sales, how do you feel? Right? And because I want to see what their current frame is, and then I will try to position our mission and how we affect that mission with the current experiences they have. And then I'll simply ask, does this sound like something that would be interesting for you to progress in?
Do you do it 100% of the time face to face, or have you ever done that via text or email or phone call?
Never via text. I could not do that via text. If they're not willing to meet with me and find out more and do a little bit of research themselves, I think I am setting myself up for failure later on.
Gotcha. So let's talk about selection. Who schedules the interview? Do you reach out yourself, or do you have somebody do that for you?
I schedule the interview. I wish more advisors would really embrace this concept that I learned from Kathy Skillington, which is always schedule the next appointment. This is your interview, Jason, so I'm just gonna spice it up. The movie Dumb and Dumber, you're saying there's a chance, right?
Yeah.
Well, when somebody says yes to the next interview, or the next appointment, they're saying there's a chance, right? And so what I've learned in recruiting is I have to determine if this person is serious. And if they're not a great candidate, they're not serious, they're not engaged with me, I'm going to toss the ball to them to reach out to me. But if they are a good candidate, I think we're a really good fit to work together, I'm going to tell them that. I'm going to set expectations for what the next step is. And then I'm going to find a time for us to meet. And I'm going to schedule the next interview right then.
Nice. That's a good strategy. And then I said I would ask this, but how much time do you commit a week to interviews?
Once upon a time, I was doing 5 interviews a week. That was the goal. So if I fell short of it, I would get 3. Some candidates moved forward. I scheduled the next interview. Those 3 become 3 new, and then I need to source 2. And so it was typically 5 to even 10 hours a week. I have some porpoising currently in this last qualifying year, and that was down to 1 to 3 hours of actual interviews. But there is some surging that goes along with interviewing. I know persistency is really important, but I also try to ensure that the projected activation of my new advisors aligns with business needs. And so that I do some surge recruiting periodically as needed.
Gotcha. All right, last question. Picking the 3 topics that we talked about, sourcing, selling, and selection, which is your most favorite part and which is your least favorite part?
Sourcing, selling, selection. Selling is the most enjoyable part, and the process of selling is consultative. That is really asking questions of the candidate to get them to self-realize. And so I think that is the most enjoyable part, because I get to know people regardless if they're a good fit for my team or not. And so the selling portion, if you're not in sales, I think this could be a little counterintuitive for you, but I am consulting and getting the client to see this for themselves, not convincing them of it. And I think that is critical when it comes to recruiting rather than selling, right? New client creation, right? So I think that pays off in the long run. It's good for them. It's good for their spouse. It's good for the team when someone really wants to be here and is aligned with our mission and vision. So that is my favorite part because I do get to know people regardless if they're a good fit. My least favorite part is likely sourcing out of that, the selection process. I think by the time I get through the interview process, and I've done a couple skill checks with folks, they're selecting themselves essentially.
Gotcha.
The sourcing process, I think, takes a lot of discipline because when you flip a coin, it always has a 50% chance of one side or the other.
Yeah.
And when you flip it tails 10 times in a row, everybody, no matter how good you are at math and statistics, you're going to feel a little beat up. And so you have to understand that the probability doesn't change, and your consistency is what is going to yield the results. And so sourcing, not always fun, because you might spend a lot of time doing things that are seemingly unproductive. But I'll go back to the beginning where I say when you do that, you remain sharp for when the right candidates show up. And humbly, I can say when I haven't done that and the right candidate has showed up, I have felt that I haven't done my best for that candidate. And hopefully that they're still interested or whatnot, but I hold myself accountable to that. So sourcing is like practice. You have to do it or you're gonna get beat. So,
I love that. All right. Well, thank you, Lance. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording.